All right.
Good evening.
Putin, Adolf Putin with Donald Trump. Let's take a look at how that went on.
A much trailed phone call between Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin. It seems a number of issues were discussed, but a ceasefire with Ukraine remains to be agreed. The White House says good progress was made, and a Kremlin official even said the world had become a much safer place today. So what exactly was agreed in that 90-minute phone conversation? Well, Vladimir Putin ordered his forces not to attack energy infrastructure as part of a mutual 30-day limited agreement with Ukraine. They also discussed a potential maritime ceasefire in the Black Sea as part of that deal. Russia and Ukraine agreed to engage in a prisoner swap tomorrow, where each side would return 175 people. The Russian President Putin said he would also hand over 23 wounded Ukrainian servicemen as a gesture of goodwill. But the Russian president has a list of conditions, including that the West halts foreign military aid and intelligence information to Ukraine. Donald Trump also supported Vladimir Putin's idea to organize an ice hockey match between Russian and American players. Well, our U.S. correspondent...
That's so fun, dude. That is... Donald Trump lives in the universe of movies. He is so perfect for America. He is such a perfect American president. That's incredible. That is incredible. This is movie mindset, dude. Straight up. He's like, yes, we should do boxing afterwards. Bring your best boxer. We'll put him up against one of our best boxers. That's right.
James Matthews is at the White House. But first, let's speak to our Moscow correspondent, Ivor Bennett. Good evening, Ivor. So a limited ceasefire when it comes to energy and infrastructure, but really President Putin reaffirming those conditions.
Yeah, that's right, Mark. So they have, as you say, agreed some kind of ceasefire, but it's nowhere near the ceasefire that was initially discussed and what was principally the aim of this call. Donald Trump wanted Vladimir Putin to sign up to this immediate 30-day truce along the front lines, which Ukraine accepted this time last week. It's taken them this long to get down to it. But what we've got instead is a much lighter version, a ceasefire whereby Russia and Ukraine have both agreed not to strike one another's energy infrastructure. And we're told by the Kremlin that Vladimir Putin has given the necessary military order for that to happen. And I think that's because Vladimir Putin had a bit of a balancing act with this phone call. He didn't want to upset Donald Trump, of course. He didn't want to incur his wrath because Russia has a lot to gain from better relations with Washington. There is talk in the last month of potentially the US lifting sanctions on Russia, readmitting them to the G7 to make it the G8 again, a reset of relations. That is what Vlad... So he had to give him something, but at the same time he wanted to emerge from this call with Russia's red lines still intact. He didn't want to give any ground on his maximalist positions, and it seems like he hasn't, because in the Kremlin's communique, there is quite a telling line, which is a bit of a refrain from Moscow. He said that, or the Kremlin said, the Russian president declared his readiness to thoroughly work out possible ways of settlement together with his American partners, which take into account the absolute need to eliminate the root causes of the crisis.
Kremlin readout of the call is different than the White House one. The White House one didn't mention end of foreign aid. Quick breakdown of the Kremlin readout of Trump's call with Putin. It doesn't look like Putin is prepared to give any ground on his maximalist positions. Putin stresses that Russia's key condition to stop a conflict from escalating and moving towards a settlement would be a total end of foreign military support and intelligence sharing with Kyiv. Ukraine thinks that any deal like this would leave it vulnerable to future attack. Understandably, they feel this way. There's no indication that Putin has dropped any of his maximalist goals. Any deal must take into account the unconditional necessity to remove the initial reasons for the crisis and Russia's legal security interests. That means effectively ending Ukraine's independence and post-Cold War security architecture in Europe. Putin hasn't agreed to Trump's proposal for a 30-day unconditional ceasefire, which Ukraine has. Instead, he pointed to a series of significant issues about how a ceasefire would be enforced and serious risks about whether Ukraine would adhere to it. Dude, I think I have something to say. that I don't think anybody's going to like. I think that America's time as the global hegemonic power is coming to a fucking close, and both our allies and our adversaries are noticing the lack of motion that we have on the global stage and basically saying, what the fuck are you going to do about it? Oh, really? Oh, really? It is kind of Jover. It's kind of Jover, like big time Jover. No more credibility at the global stage. And while we're doing that, while that's happening, we just like our inability to recognize that is making us more angry, more resentful. And Trump's way of getting out of this rut is basically to just attack the remaining allies that we have. Weirdly enough, it just doesn't make any sense. Hey, come on, man. What about all the tech stuff we have? We're 99% ahead in tech. All the world's biggest companies that people use are here. No, first of all, MindDrive, LibDrive, China. One word, China. Secondly, even if we are dominating in the tech field, and we are certainly dominating in certain aspects of tech, like America's still an industry leader in key sectors. That's not wrong. It doesn't matter. It's no longer the singular hegemonic power player. That's simply what I'm talking about. And a big part of why we're no longer the hegemonic power player, even in the field, in like tech or commodities, consumer products, things, services, is also because of a deep focus on short-term profit seeking. Like short-term profit seeking also creates a negative incentive structure where many of these corporations only care about their quarterly earnings reports and how their actions reflect on the stock price in general. And that also is putting America behind global competition coming from China. It is a very interesting predicament. But what I'm talking about here is foreign policy. I'm not even talking about like tech leadership. I'm talking specifically about America and the way that America used to operate. Our allies like Israel and our adversaries like Russia are taking note of the little power that the United States of America has, as long as they have the backing of a very powerful global competitor like China. Even if China itself, with respect to Russia, even if China itself is not an active participant in the same way that like America is with Ukraine, the fact that China is now seen as a global competitor that can still keep you going no matter what you do, as you are attacking a foreign nation. The fact that China exists out there in the periphery and can say like, look, we're not fully on board with everything that Russia is doing, but like we're kind of on board with it. You know what I mean? We're just going to let them do whatever they want to do, which is kind of the Chinese position at this point, right? If that alone is enough for Russia to be able to resist American dominance, if that alone is enough for Russia to say like, yeah, we're going to get all of our maximalist positions that we won over in the battlefield, that's a terrifying prospect for America enjoyers, I think. For those who have enjoyed the age of America. Is skipping again? Hold on, I'm going to do something real quick. It's going to skip okay. It should be good now. No, I know. I did that on purpose. Calm down. I did that on purpose. I tried to fix the ingest with the hopes that like I try to skip the ingest, fix the ingest with the hopes that like the skipping goes away, because I think that it's happening at the server side, not on the Twitch server, but my cloud server that I run this stream off of. But let's get back to this conversation.
That is a phrase we've heard a lot in the past week or so, because when Vladimir Putin talks about root causes, in his eyes, that is NATO's eastward expansion. It's essentially Kremlin code for saying that our security concerns need to be met, and for Ukraine never to join NATO. And I think he was probably also talking there about Russia's desire not to have any foreign troops there, any troops from NATO countries acting as peacekeepers. So it seems like Russia's red lines are intact. And the reason why Vladimir Putin is so reluctant to sign up to a straight ceasefire, of course, is because he feels he doesn't have to whilst they have the military advantage. The longer talk.
Yeah, Putin made Trump wait for the call. Classic power move. Putin is meant to be seeking the Trump around now, but he's talking to a room full of oligarchs instead. Instead, if he's going to be late, Putin waves off the question. Asked if he's going to be late, Putin waves off the question and says not to listen to his spokesman. I'm willing, by the way, questions like that with Vladimir Putin are asked ahead of time, okay? That is a carefully crafted question coming from a spokesman who asked that question not as like a polite conversation or on accident. That was deliberate. The reason why he had his spokesman ask that question is because of the same reason why he was late to the conversation. Is deliberate. And no, when it comes to diplomacy, it's not dumb alpha shit. Are you kidding me? No, there's a difference. Dumb alpha shit is entirely different when we're talking about global diplomacy. The reason why he's doing that is to say, I hold the cards, you don't, to Donald Trump. No, this is a part of diplomacy. He is not just aura farming or clip farming or being like an alpha bro or whatever. He is saying to Donald Trump, you look weak. You are weaker. You have to entertain, because you came out and you said, I'm going to end the war in Ukraine in a day, like an idiot, and then actively undermined Zelenskyy, actively undermined the Ukrainian position, even went as far as like refusing to do intelligence sharing for an extended period of time with Ukraine. You set yourself up for this. You are reliant on me coming to the table and conceding to any demands that you make. And if I have demands of my own, you have to concede on that side, because you've made assurances to your audience, to your voters, that, you know, you've made assurances to your audience and your voters that you were going to end this. So now the ball's in my court.
Не знаю, насколько не знаю, сейчас надо посмотреть, что на эту фразу скажет.
By this count and the timing the Kremlin announced earlier, Putin was 1 hour late to his call. 1 hour late. He made Donald Trump wait for an hour. He made America wait for 60 whole minutes, dude. Are you crazy? Yeah. You look at that and you think, oh, that's like alpha behavior or whatever. He's just trying to be like alpha. It's like silly. It's silliness. And in any other circumstance, you're right. In diplomacy, you're not right. Putin, let's continue. Putin did agree to Trump's proposal for a moratorium on strikes on energy infrastructure and a maritime security initiative in the Black Sea, but Ukraine and Russia have reached agreements on that before, even though they've broken down. Ukraine is just one topic amid Russia's broader goal of normalizing relations with the U.S. They discussed a broad spectrum of directions where the U.S. and Russia could cooperate further, including mutually beneficial partnership in economics and energy. Russia and the U.S. will work together on other issues like the Middle East. There will be joint efforts to stabilize the situation in crisis zones, as well as establishing cooperation on nuclear non-proliferation and global security. The U.S. and Russia are going to host hockey matches, the NHL and KHL players. That would do a lot to end Russia's sporting isolation after invading Ukraine. Incredible. He's getting bitched at. Straight up. Art of the deal, baby. Vladimir Putin's going to turn around and be like, have you said thank you once? Vladimir Putin's going to turn around and have, I don't know, some national news broadcaster dress down Trump in the same way that, like, Trump had Marjorie Titan Greene's boyfriend yell at Zelenskyy. Then turn around and say, have you said thank you once? Suka blyat, have you said thank you once? Davai. Anyway,
talks go on before a ceasefire.
White House readout says they agreed Iran should never have the ability to destroy Israel. Yeah, that's a dramatically different way to approach this. Russia and U.S. will work together on issues like the Middle East. There will be joint efforts to stabilize the situation on nuclear non-proliferation. Okay? White House's attitude on that same conversation is, they said they would destroy Iran. Yeah, he's going to have Lukashenko behave like his JD Vance. Yeah. The leader spoke broadly about the Middle East and region's potential cooperation to prevent future conflicts. They further discussed the need to stop proliferation of strategic weapons and will engage with others to ensure the broadest possible application. The two leaders shared the view that Iran should never be in a position to destroy Israel. This is some crazy stuff, man. So I guess Iran is getting that nuclear program after all. Who knows? Who knows?
The more gains Russia makes, and particularly in Russia's Kursk region, where it seems like Ukraine's incursion there is all but over. I think Vladimir Putin is very keen to get that secured and get that wrapped up before there's any kind of pause in the fighting. So I'd say that the Kremlin would be very pleased with the outcome of this call.
Because in effect, President Putin now has a little more room.
Yeah, these guys saying that Iran nuclear proliferation must not happen basically means like the nuclear arms race is on the one hand Russia potentially giving nukes to Iran, and then America giving nukes to Saudi Arabia. Fucking awesome, dude.
To carry on this war.
Yeah, I think so. There's room to maneuver, clearly. Yes, there's no strikes on military infrastructure, but the key thing right now, the key goal for Moscow is totally expelling
what happened with Charlie Kirk?
The Ukrainian forces from the Kursk region. That was hugely embarrassing when that started at the beginning of August, that cross-border assault. It took the Kremlin and Vladimir Putin by surprise, and it's hugely embarrassing that it's gone on this long. Now that victory is in his sights there, he wants to kind of make Russia all Russian again. He doesn't want to let up. And he was in the Kursk region last week, dressed in military fatigues, as you can see. That was a very symbolic visit. And I think it really sent a message to Washington and Ukraine that he doesn't want to give up his military advantage, because he fears, of course, any pause in the fighting will allow the Ukrainians to rearm and regroup, and he fears he might lose that advantage. This is a way of giving himself that room to maneuver on the battlefield, and that could happen within days that the Ukrainian forces are completely expelled. So I'd say it's a bit of a fudge here, a ceasefire light, nowhere near the ceasefire that was initially touted and agreed last week with the Ukrainians and the US.
Ivor, thank you very much. Let's go to James Matthews in Washington. And James, I suppose what President Trump can claim is that things are progressing.
Yeah, and you know what? He can make these claims because the Russians have given him that opportunity. Look at the dressing around this deal, the hockey match between Russian players and American players. That will speak to Trump. He likes to talk sport. He likes to sell sport. And Americans, many in this country, care more about ice hockey, frankly, than they do about a war far away that they don't think affects them. The prisoner exchange, you can bet that Donald Trump will headline that as an achievement of his. So, you know, there is the dressing that allows Donald Trump to style himself as the artist of the deal, if you like. But I think he's been outboxed in this particular set of circumstances. If you look at the guts of this, I mean, key phrases jump out. Ivor talking there about the root causes and how Putin is ring-fencing what he sees as the root causes of all this. The root cause and the roots of this are that Putin thinks Ukraine belongs to Russia. Talk about the root causes. You talk about disarming Ukraine and essentially giving Putin the territorial advantage that he wants long term. So I can't see Ukraine agreeing to anything with regard to that. But more than that, there is the key line about American and presumably European assistance to Ukraine in terms of weapon supply and intelligence supply. Putin wants that to stop, a complete cessation he speaks about. So the scenario being presented by Putin is for Ukraine basically to stop having fresh weaponry, to do nothing, to be weakened during the period of any ceasefire, whilst, of course, at the same time, Russia can arm itself and rearm to the teeth, therefore strengthening its position during a ceasefire. And of course, if the ceasefire results, if that breaks down, then you have a strengthened Putin, whilst Ukraine has been playing the gentleman's game and is left far weaker. So I think in Ukraine and in European capitals, they are looking at this through their fingers and praying that Donald Trump doesn't find a television camera anytime soon and say that is a deal worth signing, because I think that is a scenario whereby Europe and Ukraine have to turn to Donald Trump and say we simply cannot accept this. There are red lines drawn by Vladimir Putin through this agreement, really unacceptable to us. So I think we're at, there have been crisis points, have there not, throughout this whole episode. I think we've reached another one here.